Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we are going to be talking about Crusader Kings II. For those of you who have never heard of this game or never played it before, Crusader Kings II is a grand strategy game that sort of bases itself off of historical time periods. It's a little bit like Romance of the Three Kingdoms, but with a lot more granularity than those games. I like the second one the most because it gives you a lot more options than the first one. You have a lot more territory you can play around with, and there's just more stuff to do in this. You take on the role of either an emperor, a king, a duke, or a count. You can't go down to the baron level for whatever reason. I'm not really sure why. I think I remember from the first game, if you are a baron, you end up losing. I chose the second one here because I've just played way more of it than I have the first one. In this game, you can basically try to take over, different parts of Europe, the Middle East, India, or even parts of Russia. So you can go all throughout Central Asia as well, and also North Africa. The map has been expanded a few times through a whole bunch of different expansions, so you have more that you can see. They moved on to Crusader Kings III, so I don't think this is going to get the same support that it got for however many years it's been on the market now. I did try the third one out, and I don't like that one as much as I do Crusader Kings II. There's nothing wrong with it, I just prefer this one to the other game. When you first start playing this, it looks really daunting. There is a lot of crap going on, there are a ton of menus that you have to navigate through, and yeah, it can be a little bit confusing. You have to name your counselors, so you have a chancellor, a marshal, a steward, a spymaster, and a chaplain. It's going to be called something different depending on who you choose. I went with England here, so everything's pretty easy to understand. If I went with an African country, it would be different, Middle East would be different, and so on and so forth. Along with your group of counselors that are going to help you, you can also have a regent in case your character is too young to actually rule on his own, and you can also get an advisor depending on whether or not the council has, more power or less. That can happen through like a civil war or through you just giving the council more power. The more power that you transfer to the council, the less that you can actually do in the game. It can make it really hard because they can just they can limit your ability to declare war on yourself, declare war by yourself. They can, limit who you can give different parts of land to. It can be a real pain in the ass to play this if you don't have just an absolute rule for your monarch. If you're not playing as the leader of a country, if you're playing as a vassal, it can work in your advantage. So you can make it so the ruler can't just, take your title away from you or take land away from you. You can make it so other people can't just declare war on you and take over. It's pretty fun. There's a lot of crazy stuff you can do in this, and yeah, you can just get lost trying to explore this entire thing. Depending on the part of the world that you choose, it changes things quite a bit. So if you go to Scandinavia and you become basically a Viking, that gives you different options. You can actually go raiding and everything like that. If you choose Buddhist, you have different things that you can do. It's really kind of crazy. Once you become a king, like I did in this one that I'm showing, you can basically hide the annoying vassals that are constantly rebelling against you. You can kind of hide them in different dukedoms and whatnot. It gets kind of cool when you advance far enough in the game. If you start off like I did in the time period where England isn't fully formed, and I'm just using England as an example, or England or the United Kingdom aren't fully formed, then you can kind of slowly conquer those. And it's a little bit easier than if you start off in France and you have to deal with a whole bunch of other bullshit that's going on. Also, the time period that you start playing the game changes how your countries are developed when you begin. It changes a lot. There is so much that I'm kind of glossing over here, but essentially what this is you kind of moving things around and acting as kind of like an overarching person in this game. You're not doing a lot of the things you would do in like a traditional real-time strategy game, because this one is assuming you kind of just want to take a step back and deal with stuff in a much different way. This is the part of the game where I think things really kind of suffer. The battles are not the most interesting part of the game. The most interesting part is really just trying to keep your line going and manipulating other countries and trying to gain more land through different means, whether it's through marriage or usurping titles, that sort of thing. That's more interesting to me. As you can see on the battles here, they're kind of boring. You're just sort of moving chess pieces around, and it really boils down to who has the bigger army going into it. I would say probably 75% of the time, if you just have more soldiers than the other guy, you're gonna win. There are a few different modifiers that come into play, but for the most part, if you have more soldiers, you are going to beat the other team, especially early on. Some stuff that can actually change that and kind of go against the grain. There are terrain modifiers, so if you're being attacked from a country that, or a different province. Wow, okay. Let me start over on that one. If you're sitting in a province that has like a river going through it, and the enemy attacks you, they will get a negative modifier because they have to cross a river in order to attack you. If you attack somebody who is up on a hill, they get a modifier that basically says they've got the high ground. You get a negative modifier saying you have to attack up on the ground. Or you have to attack the high ground. Wow, that's getting a little bit more complicated to actually describe. But those are the modifiers that can kind of impact you moving around. So if you are landing, say you are a Viking and you're attacking a land location and there's an army in that province, you will get a negative modifier because you are trying to land. You also have a morale modifier, which greatly impacts what you're doing. So when you lose a battle and your army retreats, they have no more morale anymore. They also get a kind of like a death modifier that adds onto it. So as you're retreating, you'll lose soldiers because they were injured in battle, because of disease, because of a whole bunch of different things. You can kind of use your own imagination on that. So it makes it a little bit harder when you lose that initial battle. It really puts you behind the 8-ball. You also have to deal with the percentage that the war is going. So you'll see that at like the bottom screen. You'll see, hey, you're in a war against this person. The more times you defeat them, the better percentage you have of winning. The more times they beat you, you'll go into a negative percentage. If it reaches 100%, then you can sue for peace and enforce your demands. If it hits negative percent, they can sue and enforce their demands. You can also have a white peace, which is good if you're being attacked by a whole bunch of different people, and you guys just kind of declare it a draw. There are certain things you can gain through that, like if you force the other party to do that. If you force them to sue for a white peace, you might get something. But yeah, it's usually better to come out on the winning side regardless. basically, the battles aren't really that great looking, and there isn't as much strategy that goes into it as there probably could have been. So what are my final thoughts on this? I really like Crusader Kings II. I really like the first one too, and I think they're both really good games. They're a little weird. It can be kind of a jarring experience to go from a real-time strategy game like StarCraft 2 or World of Warcraft or something like that, and then play a grand strategy where you're not doing as much. You don't have as much control over the battles. You don't have as much control over what you're building. You don't really have as much control over how many troops you recruit and that sort of thing. Those are the parts where Crusader Kings 2 kind of falls apart, but it gives you a lot more options to kind of try and continue with everything. It's a really fun game, but it might take a while to get into it. It's not as visually impressive as some other games, but it gets the job done for what they're trying to do. So that's going to wrap things up, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and definitely let me know what you think if you consider, if you like real-time strategy games more than grand strategy games. Or if you can think of other grand strategy games, that would be fun. Anyway, talk to you all later. Bye.